Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Peter H. Bailey, he's an author, global facilitator, TEDx speaker and leadership strategist whose 4 decades of work have taken him to more than 50 countries. His book, The Epic of You, is a blueprint for personal transformation. In it, Peter demonstrates how reframing your past can change everything. He reminds readers that an epic life isn't about perfection. It's about courage, meaning and choosing your attitude every step of the way. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. So tell me a little bit about you and your background and how and why you came to write this book.
Well, thanks. You know, it's like everybody else. We have good things in our life and we have bad things in our life, and we seem to sort them that way. And, you know, as I'm in the ripe young age of 66, looking at what my next adventure will be, I kind of look back at some of those painful things and think, I don't really want those. And yet they taught me so much. In fact, many of those hard things in our life gave me what I call honey to my heart, made me more compassionate. And the other things that happened to us gave me what I call strength to my sword arm, made me more resilient. And when you look at your life and you realize these things actually made us who we are, every single thing that's happened to us, what if I went back and reframed everything in my life for what I learned from it or what it did for me? So that's really what prompted the book, and I'm excited to share it with you and your listeners.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you're right. We all go through good and bad things in our lives, and it's how we deal with those things, how we overcome these things, and whether we learn from them or not. You know, we can go through our whole lives feeling like a victim because of bad things that happen to us, whether it's to do with money or work or loss and grief and things like that. But it's how we get through these things, and that ultimately is a choice, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think we have to get better at knowing how to discern our choices, and that's where the heroic journey model is so useful from Joseph Campbell. He helps us look at plotting our lives on a bit of a map. You know, when we're setting out on any big choice, what's the preparation? Who are our allies that help us? What are the roadblocks or barriers? And then what happens to us in what he calls the dark night of the soul, or the part of the journey that you signed on for but aren't all that happy about halfway through.
Yeah.
And then we come back changed from those, and we live a better life.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us some of the bad things, if you like, that have happened to you in your life that you've learned from, and what have you learned?
Yeah, so as a young boy, I grew up, my father was a Navy pilot off of aircraft carriers and a really good guy, but came out of the military, and before I was born had a brain hemorrhage. And I was born into a family with my mom as a nurse and my dad disabled from a brain hemorrhage and aneurysm. And growing up back then in the 60s and early 70s, not having a father and the elements around that became the Achilles heel for me. It was the thing that I didn't like to talk about. It was the elephant in the room. And I didn't realize till later how much that actually helped me be more compassionate, more sensitive, and more helpful and useful to others. I also, at 22, stopped drinking and doing recreational drugs in a way that I had been. And that also changed my life. So a hard thing, a surrendering point, changed everything when I began to reframe them.
Yeah. And what about all the traveling that you've done? How has that impacted your life?
Well, having malaria and dysentery in Africa, traveling overland years ago, those were brutal times, going through cholera country, having a tropical ulcer carved out of my back without any anesthesia.
Oh, my goodness.
Things like that are painful. And yet when we come through them, you just somehow feel like I can do the next thing. I tell a story both in the TED Talk and in the book, The Epic of You, about my wife who discovered she had, throat cancer. And the treatments were difficult and painful and very debilitating to go through all the treatments. And they gave her 2 devices. And as I told in the book, she had to rename these devices and didn't want them. But one was a port to do infusions and one was a peg tube for food to be sort of like an IV bag into her stomach. And nobody wants these, of course. But she said, you know what? I'll take them if I can rename them. And she renamed the port Power, and she renamed the peg tube Purpose. And now she had power and purpose to continue with her through her journey. And today I'm happy to say she's 10 years clear of cancer. But a lot of that, I think, is having had the sense to use a heroic journey mindset to elevate her through that experience and bring as much positivity to that as she could.
Oh, what a great story. I'm so pleased and happy that she's 10 years cancer free. That's amazing. And yeah, that makes total sense. You know, a lot of people have to go through grueling treatment for cancer and other medical conditions. And yeah, those little reframing and renaming horrible experiences can make a huge difference to how you feel about them, can't it?
Well, and also how we feel about ourselves. You know, so many adults are in transition right now. So many young people are going through struggles of who are they and what are they supposed to do in life. My wife works at a university, and Hannah, you may have heard this terrifying statistic that the second highest form of death on college campuses is suicide. So this isn't just older people trying to figure out their lives. It's younger people coming up against challenging, ambiguous times and not having the tools with which to work with.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to get better at choice making. We need to recognize who are the allies at every point of our journey, and are we reaching out and using our allies? I lived overseas and traveled over 50 countries, and at each point I learned, how do I find an ally here? Who are my helping people who can make this transition, my integration into living in Indonesia or Singapore, work well? And then also, what can I do to bring light to the connections so that, you know, I don't know how many Americans they were going to meet in my town, but I wanted them to meet a good one. And I wanted to be a representative of what is the best in human nature. And I think we each have a choice and a chance to do that every day.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about in the book is the whole idea of when life says no, you know, when things go wrong and you come across obstacles in your life, which we all do, the way of looking at obstacles and kind of reframing it as a catalyst for redirection.
Right. And I think sometimes we look at barriers as, you know, people who have kept us from the job we wanted or a flat tire on the way to a job interview. And we curse the fates on why me. But if we look back through the lens of the heroic journey and this idea of my life as an epic journey, we can see that perhaps those were teachers that kept us at the door before we were ready to come in. And I think part of reframing for anybody is to look back and say, all those barriers, check them again and say, were those actually helpful? You know, I wasn't ready for that banking job. I didn't get it, and it's probably a good thing. That relationship didn't work out, and in hindsight, that was probably a good thing. But at the time, we kind of get all caught up in the moment of how diminished we are by those barriers.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think everyone could relate to that. The whole why me, and when a job doesn't go well or a relationship doesn't go well, it seems like the worst thing in the world at the time. But when you look back, you realize, it obviously wasn't meant to be, because then this happened, which wouldn't have happened if I got that job or if I stayed in that relationship.
Right. And I think that's part of this idea of how our choices, we can mature our choices. How do I pick better choices so that I will have better choices to pick from? And I think that's part of reflection and wisdom that we get as we get older is to discern, but also it's really leaning on a community. And I think I talk a lot about going to a fire circle or finding, you know, men with men, women with women, finding your community that can support you in thinking through what's next for me, and is this the right choice? I see that happening a lot in our communities here is these little book groups or coffee gatherings. People really circle in and start supporting each other for choices. And I think that is so critical. Richard Leiter, who wrote the foreword for the book, talks about isolation is fatal. So I think we need to, whatever age we are in, we need to find our people, and we need to find people who can help us think through some of these processes and feel through these processes so that we are not alone.
Yeah, I think everyone will have experienced being around people who are really uplifting and inspiring and pleasant to be around, and you leave the experience thinking, oh, that was so good. I really enjoyed that. That was brilliant. And the opposite, being around people who are really draining and negative and make you feel bad about yourself, and you kind of think, why did I just waste an hour of my time with them? And we need to really focus on being around people who make us feel good.
Well, and I think that's where, again, maybe that's with some wisdom of getting older, but we realize we don't have time for people who don't fill us up or elevate us. There's a wonderful book out there by Greg McKeown called Essentialism. And he says, we say yes to so many things, being on that committee, being on that board, being in, I'll do that, I'll do this other thing. And he says, what if you said no to everything and then hell yes to the ones that you know are the right ones, and to try that on for a while, to just practice, what are my hell yeses today? And not giving in to being with people we don't want to be with, doing things we don't want to be spending time doing, but really living more of a hell yes life.
Yeah, absolutely. We all know that life can be too short, and it's precious, and our time is precious. We're all really busy, and it's nice if we're all really busy doing things that we enjoy with people we want to be with. But what a waste of life to to be doing things we don't like or being with people that we don't want to be with.
Well, and I think a big part of that is getting out of ourselves too, Hannah, where we say, okay, I'm having a bad day. Who might I help who's having a worse day? And making that phone call, reaching out, going to the grocery store and looking around and seeing who's counting pocket change to see if they can buy the bread today. And what are the little things that I can do to brighten their world and the world at large? And I think that's where we can be more of service in our lives. And I think the Epic of You talks about that. It really is about, how do I see my life in the short span that you're talking about as making more of a difference, having more of a positive impact.
Yeah. Yeah. As well as thinking about other people who lift you up, think about being the person that lifts other people up as well. It's twofold, isn't it?
Absolutely. My kids always say, Dad, why are you talking to those people? There are toll collecting booths on New Jersey Turnpike, and there's people stuck in these glass booths for 8 hours a day. And I would stand and pause and hand them, treats and chocolates, and, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to them? Because they're stuck in a phone booth.
Yeah.
They're stuck in a toll booth. Like, let's make their day or tell them a joke. And I think that's part of what we can do in just revisiting who we are in our lives and where have we done that already and where can we do more of that.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of a difference little things like that can make when you're, I was in a restaurant last night and seeing how different people interact with the wait staff. Some people are rude, quite frankly. Other people are just, treating them as wait staff, and other people are really kind and interacting with them and saying, oh, where are you from? And, oh, this is such a fabulous place. Thank you so much for looking after us. And, just giving them that little bit extra. If they've given you something, or even if they haven't, to be honest, but, make them feel good about themselves. So they finish work going, oh, there was this really nice man in there tonight who was really kind and friendly, instead of going home going, oh, I hate my job.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think I notice that right away when people are cruel to service people or unkind. One of the things, Hannah, I've learned to do is when I work with corporate groups and I'll have a group of 20 or 35 people, I will take 2 minutes and memorize everybody's first name. And then as we start the session, I'll say, let me just let you know that I know who you are. And I'll go around the room and call out all of their names. And then, of course, they give a little applause like, wow. And then I'll ask, how many of you don't think that you can memorize 30 people's names in 2 minutes. And they all raised their hands because who could do that? And I said, well, neither can I until I made it important. And so those are the things that I can't do either until, no, it's important. I don't want to just say you in the blue. I want to call out Stuart or Susan or Diane. And when we do that, people love hearing their own names, and it shows that we've made the effort to connect, and particularly cross-culturally. What can we do to learn more about the cultures of the people we're working with so that we are not on that superficial level, but we actually can submerge into the water of culture and have a better sense of the appropriate protocol, the language, the greetings, the connections, so that we feel like they have been more respected, and we'll build a better bridge that way.
Oh, definitely. You must have got a lot of that from your travels through being in different countries and experiencing different cultures and meeting all the people.
Yeah, that is the gift. And I think part of what happens is when we get into these polarized places politically, it's that we don't understand what's important to other people. And the more we take time, we may not agree with it, but we need to understand what's important to this culture, this group, these people, this person, what's going on for them that I can better understand, and then make my way of building a bridge to connect.
Yeah. It's so narrow-minded, isn't it? And that's just being polite, just to think that your way, because it's the only way you know, is obviously the right way, and everyone else is weird, and what they're doing or what they believe or how they dress or anything else is strange and odd and wrong, just because it's not what you're used to or what you believe in.
Well, and even our language, for years the word was called foreigners. And foreigners means they are foreign from us. And that's not a good word today. We need to not call anybody a foreigner. We need to say, they're friends we haven't met yet, or they are, international colleagues. But I think we have to watch even our language on what is the wordage we're using that might continually build the barrier.
Yeah. And it must have been a really difficult but also fun project putting this book together. I can tell you're really passionate about it.
Well, it's cathartic, and it's my first book, but to write all this down, and it may not be my last, I have to say that, but just the idea of saying, well, what do I know? What do I believe? What's important to me? And as I mentioned in just the introduction, I wish this book had been written for me to give me a better sense of a roadmap through life. So I really do hope your listeners will find this useful as they think through whatever transition they're going through at whatever age. Who am I? What's at my core? What's important? And who are the people that can join me on my journey?
Yeah, lovely. Well, if people want to get a copy of The Epic of You, it's available now on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Peter H. Bailey, who we've been chatting with. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Hannah, thank you so much, and so appreciate your show.